Hi, I'm Maddie Scarry. I'm the director of the Poppy Jasper International Film Festival. And today we're going to talk about visual effects with visual effects artist David Tanaka and filmmaker Jameson Desantis. David is an editor, producer, and creative director. His experience range from visual effects and animation to documentary and live action feature films with over 25 years of experience. David has worked at ILM in visual effects production, Pixar as a special projects manager, and now as a visual effects editor at Tippet Studios. He's worked on motion pictures such as Jurassic Park, Forrest Gump, Star Wars, Cars, Ratatouille, Up, and Toy Story, just to name a few. David also has his own award-winning film production company and launched Cinemabilities, a project offering visual effects filmmakers courses for young adults with special needs. He is currently second vice chair on the Visual Effects Society Board of Directors. Welcome, David, and thank you for being here. Thank you, Jameson, for being here, and I look forward to hearing more about the visual effects in your film, Just a Ghoul.
Well, thank you, Maddie. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me participate in this event. I am joined today, as Maddie said, by Jameson Desantis, and we're going to talk about his Poppy Jasper International Film Festival award-winning film, Just a Ghoul, which I had the pleasure to partake in terms of being a judge on the panel. So Jameson, welcome.
Thank you guys so much. It's a pleasure to be here, and it was so much fun to participate in Poppy Jasper. Thanks for selecting us, and thanks for awarding us.
Absolutely. And I have to say, I found your film to be very refreshing in different ways, and we'll talk about that as we go. But let's just kick it off with, how did you come to this project to begin with? What was the impetus?
I had, in addition to being a visual effects artist, I also fancied myself a stand-up comedian, and very quickly realized I didn't want to keep being that part of my life, being a stand-up. But I met a lot of very funny people along the way, one of which was J.J. Nolan, who is the star of the film, the female ghost Mara. And we wanted to keep writing things and making things. And our first idea was, let's start doing some sketches. These are fun. These are funny. And we had a very cute idea for a sketch, which was, what if a person was haunted by their date and they couldn't actually pass on until the date ended? And it wasn't some amazing last thing they had to accomplish in their life, like tell someone they love them or save a pet from dying. It was just, they literally have to do the very last thing they were doing before they died to move on. And it was a date. And we wrote a 7-page script for it. And it just seemed like it had more substance to it. And so expanded it into a full short script, which ran in the movie's 29 minutes, and cast it and turned it into a whole thing. So it really just started from a very simple, stupid romantic comedy sketch and turned into a short film.
Well, what I love about the concept is that it's such an outlandish premise, but at the same time, I think it speaks volumes for it strikes a nerve with a lot of people. I think a lot of people have relationships that don't go the way they want. And suddenly you start thinking about, what if I'm haunted by, this bad relationship?
Yeah. The premise at least certainly lends itself to a larger story, at least about people never really working on themselves, and even in death, getting a chance to still better themselves, and putting yourself, working on yourself before you can really be with someone else.
I'm also a huge Ghost fan, not Ghost the movie. I do love the movie Ghost the movie, but also just in general. Not to get into it a little too much, but my family has some ghost stories. My parents are both from Hawaii, and Hawaiian culture is very much into spirits and honoring past lives and unforeseen meetings with spirits and so forth. So I kind of grew up around that, and I think as a kid, because of that, I was even a little bit more hip to whenever there's a movie or a television show that had ghosts in it, that was a big deal to me because
Yeah.
it just resonated. And so I kind of want to approach this both from the narrative perspective, you touched on that a little bit, but also from the technical perspective, because part of the charm that what I liked about your movie is we've seen a gazillion ghost movies, and the simplest thing is your 50% opacity seen through one piece of footage placed slapped on top of another, and lo and
Right.
behold, you have a ghost, right?
Right.
And then on top of that, then you can get into more sophistication. I'm a big fan of Guillermo del Toro's work, and I love that, he's got a thing for things that scare you, but maybe they're not that scary. How do you
Right.
present that? How far do you push the computer graphic technology that you have, pretty much everyone has access to now? It's not a gazillion expensive as it was before, but how do you temper that against the story? And that's why I thought your piece was such an award-winning piece, because it doesn't pretend to be, just like what you said with the narrative, and maybe this is the key, it doesn't pretend to be anything greater than what it is. It's a fun nutshell story, and your effects complement it to the extent that it needs to complement it. It doesn't take it into, as Maddie mentioned, I've been in visual effects for 30 years, do I dare venture? But the notion of the visual effects taking over a movie is a very common thing, from a filmmaker standpoint and also from a studio standpoint, because everyone's so trying to second guess what people want. So one of the things that resonated with me with your piece was how much the topic complemented the visual effects and the visual effects complemented the topic. So can you kind of go into that? How did you go from a 7-page script to a 29-minute film? And how did you break apart the visual effects? How did you go about managing that and deciding what is going to be a visual effect and what we can do practically?
Right. Well, thank you so much for the kind words. I really love hearing that. And I think that is a very important point of differentiating the visual effects that need to be there and the visual effects that are just there because you need something exciting on screen. And yes, film is a visual medium, but there's a limit, and it's really hard to balance that. And that was certainly a challenge for me because this was the first thing I've ever directed, and my strengths are in visual effects. So a lot of that was some restraint. It's like, oh, let's make the ghost this prismatic color, and let's make her shift colors every scene based on her mood. There were a lot of early ideas of things we could do with the ghost that would make.
I have a new software plugin.
Yes. Yeah. Especially over the last couple of years, machine learning has really become integrated in a lot of popular software. And certainly with this one, the story was always going to speak first. It was the sketch that we were originally in love with. And when we brought it to a male lead, Jacob Zakar, to play it, when we brought him the sketch, he was just like, I think this could be a better short film. I think this has more story to it. And honestly, it challenged me as a writer to add much more character, much more depth, things you actually cared about. And those ended up motivating a lot of the visual effects. So part of what I liked about the ghost is that you get this element of transparency with a character. It is kind of a visual analogy. And it's nice that by the end of the film, she becomes fully opaque, or I'm sorry, she becomes non-transparent. She becomes a full person once she finally has her true character arc, which I love that just we can see through her this whole time, who's she trying to kid. And by the end of it, when she's had her realization, she is full, so
that's funny. I never took it from that perspective, but I think that's good, because I'm a big believer in, you give the audience just enough of a feel or a certain vibe of something, and then you let them own it. And it's like someone saying, I like a painting or something. Why do you like it? I'm not quite sure. I just like it. But there's some subtext in there, so that transparency is a really good one.
Yeah, you may not be able to articulate it or verbalize it as an audience member, but as long as you can see it and you kind of
Yeah.
understand what it meant, like, you know, you don't never necessarily have to be able to express it after. And as far as the visual effects went, I think this film was really challenging because it is very long. It's 29 minutes. And we definitely had limited resources. This is a low budget, basically what I could afford movie. So things like motion control, stuff that you really
Yeah.
need to do transparency very well with a character, weren't going to be an option for us in here. But we didn't want every single shot to be static. A lot of the shots are static. So I personally don't like that feel. It looks very student film. What we had to do with basically every shot that the ghost is in is have the performance with the actor, take a plate of the background that they're on, and then we basically, after compositing, are adding camera effects back in. So there's at least
That's what I
some
was going to
subtle
ask you.
movement.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that ended up being something that made the whole movie feel much more alive, is developing a process where there was a little bit of parallaxing, just a little bit enough of 3D movement that we burned into the plate, and then basically tracked our foreground plate that the ghost was on over it, applied the effect, and then added an extra camera movement, so that it felt a little more alive and a little more like someone was holding the camera,
Right.
so that every shot isn't so boring, because unfortunately with limited time and limited locations, like, a lot of shots just have to be locked off, you know, and that gets really stale even if you're looking at a ghost, you know.
Well,
After the
you're
first
right. One of the things that I do in my spare time is I teach an editing course at the Academy of Art, San Francisco. And, you know, I'm dealing with students that are usually trying to graduate with a short film that they created, usually a CGI short film. And you get into this weird kind of lockjaw demeanor, which is because I storyboarded it and the storyboard is static.
Yeah.
That's how I'm going to shoot it. And so
Right.
I'm constantly reminding students, like, this is a movie, you know? I mean, it's one of the clear demarcations that, oh, I'm looking at student work, is when you can,
Yeah.
where it's just wide shot, medium shot,
Yeah.
180. You know, they're so concerned about the 180 degree. Did you cross the 180
Yeah.
degree? Forget about
I
that, you
know.
know?
Crossing the line and just
But that's
make it.
fantastic that you guys found a way to do it in post, and your solution in description is an easy one. It's a lot harder to execute, so it doesn't look like a post
Right.
move. But
Right.
that's fantastic that not only you thought about it, but you executed it, you know? I mean,
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things that, since we did have such limited time with our locations, since a lot of shots had to be static, like, it does get boring, and you really need to find a way to make each frame a little more exciting. And
yeah,
I would much rather shoot, you know, with someone holding the camera and get a little bit of life in it. But it's definitely a way to shortcut, you know, having to lock off, is adding camera movements later. And a lot of the way we did it is really just holding a track mark. I have it with me, actually. So I have it on my wall for some reason, because, you know, you keep doing
huh?
stuff. I just hold a
Yeah,
track mark on my door,
yeah.
and just with a cell phone, I just sat there and just held it steadily at different focal ranges, and then used that tracking info to apply to those shots later on.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And then,
That's
of course,
fantastic.
I think the secret to that is shooting everything a little bit wider than you'd like to.
Definitely.
Because if you shoot in a larger resolution, like something like 4K, or at least Super HD, you can have a little more room to push in and get the shot you really want without that resolution
Yeah.
being sacrificed.
I mean, one of the things that I love, I freelance edit on various projects, one of which was an independent movie. And again, it's kind of same circumstances, very limited budget, very limited
Yeah.
time. They shot it, you know, really quick, but a lot of the material was 4K, and the delivery was going to be like a 1920 by 1080.
Right.
So in reviewing the
Yeah.
material, you know, I was pleasantly surprised to find out, like, oh, you know, you didn't get a medium shot, but I can punch in. I can
Yeah.
actually, you know, create things and
Totally.
you know, suddenly it's like cut on movement. Well, I'm actually cutting on the same shot. I just changed the
Right.
camera position on it. Um, Well, let me, one of the things that I also like about it is it feels to me, and again, I'm kind of dating myself, but it feels to me like a rom-com from the 80s/90s for me. And it's hilarious that your lead kind of looks like Steve Guttenberg too, who was a big, you know, comedy actor in the 80s. But again, one of the deciding factors when I was judging your short was, given the kind of genre or the feel that you're going for, the effects matched it. Like you could put up a ghost visual effects shot from movie A and movie B, and you can tell someone which one's better, but it's not really a fair assessment. It's like, which one's better for the
Right.
the mood you're going for. And what you're going for is, you're not trying to make people scared of ghosts. You're trying to make it like, this is just another dimension, and this is a satirical comedic situation. So I mean, just like the still that you have behind you of the actress, Steve Guttenberg, and the actress at the bar, you added the diffusion on it, the glow. It's not presented to be anything horrific or haunted, like from a haunted house. It's got
Right.
that, it's got almost like a cotton candy kind of sweetness to it, if I dare say so. It's blue.
You dare.
But did that go into kind of your aesthetic, kind of coming up
Yeah,
with a look?
absolutely. So I'm really glad you brought that up, because one of the biggest inspirations, I'd say, for this movie, from the scoring to the ghost look, was The Frighteners by Peter Jackson.
Yeah.
I love that movie. It's a comedy, sort of noir movie. I love it. So having that kind
Was
of
that
balance,
90s? I think that was 90s,
it's
right?
probably like early 90s. It has Michael J. Fox in it,
Right.
and yeah. So I mean, it's a comedy first and foremost, and then everything else in it is the world, it's the genre, but it's a really well done comedy, and all the ghost stuff really serves as punchline effects, and they don't try to be more than they are, but they're all very effective. So
Mhm.
honestly, when I was developing the look of the ghost, I watched The Frighteners a lot and stopped on frames and saw how the ghost moved. And the blue hue is partially matched from that movie. What I saw in that movie was a very effective use of ghosts, but what I thought didn't sell as much were some of the shots where the ghosts were interacting with things. They were clearly shot on like a blue screen or green screen. So I wanted all my ghost stuff to be shot just in the scene, and we
Yeah.
didn't have time to set up a green screen behind our actor every single time, or ever,
Yeah.
actually. We only have like a pickup day, and every single other thing is rotoed, or like a machine learning starting to get a matte, and then I finish it off, which is why it took so long. But I think one of the things that I found that I wanted to change from The Frighteners, and when I looked at it and said, okay, what do I like about this look? As an audience member, you might have seen something like this before, and having had that precedent will make this look less scary, will bring you further into the comedy, and won't be such a new novel thing where you have to challenge each shot. You've seen ghosts, you've seen blue hues before, like this is sort of common. But the one thing I wanted to change was most of those shots were like full transparent. So everything from head to body looks pretty much 50-50. I felt like when I did that, I lost a lot of the actor's performance.
Yeah.
So I wanted to change certain parts of the body. So while the body, depending on how light or dark the background is, maybe a 50 to 60 to 40, the face part is pretty much up all the way except for like 10 or 15%. And then
Interesting.
everything spans out from there, 30, 40, 80 to the hair, you know? So I wanted to keep all of the look focused on the actor's face, by making that a less transparent item of the shot.
So are you splitting the actors' footage in different matte passes and
Yeah,
combining them with kind of like
yeah.
soft mattes?
Yeah, like a heavily feathered matte, I basically bring the face back a little bit. I apply like basically a full effect to the whole thing, and then kind of reverse matte, bring back certain parts of the body. Because
Interesting.
on the edge of her shoulders and some parts of her body that are less active and have less kind of acting in them, that's
Hmm.
where I kind of have some like little effects. Like there's a chromatic aberration that kind of happens. And one of the other things I didn't notice so much in the Frighteners is that you don't really feel the depth of their bodies in it. So I have a sort of water turbulence effect that just happens in the center of their bodies. So it looks like if you're looking through them, the background is kind of moving and swaying
Yeah.
as if the organs have been replaced with essentially like a swirling gray matter
Right.
that
Just
doesn't really have
give it some
anything going
motion.
on. Yeah,
Interesting.
but
Yeah.
something that makes it look like there's something from here to here,
Yeah.
where the 2D, just 50-50 doesn't really do that. It's just like, well, I can see the exact pattern of the couch behind her. I can see everything right behind her. I can see the license plate of the car behind her. But when I put
Gotcha.
that right there, it at least gives the impression that there's more depth than there actually is.
Well, not that in particular, but do you have, or maybe you do you have any examples that you can kind of share with us?
Yeah, I have my software pulled up, which I'm just going to share screen with you right now. And I
Okay.
think what I'll do is I'll kind of go over the look of my ghost,
Okay.
kind of the thing we were just talking about now. So, it's a little touchy there, but all right. So this is one of the scenes in the movie. The ghost is outside, and she's talking to another ghost who's decided to possess a cat. So in this one scene, which is just a nice example of something behind her, something in front of her, and the blank plate we had to shoot on, I'm going to go into my comp, and I'm just going to hit some of the highlights of it. Oops, not that one. Of course. And I apologize, it's a little bit dense, but it just goes to exemplify how many effects are in the movie.
Jameson, can you talk about what program you're using here?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a flame artist, which Autodesk Flame is a program that I would best describe as essentially a souped up After Effects. It's very popular in working with commercials, and I'm a finishing artist. So by the time a commercial or a film gets to me, we're usually the last stop before delivery. We're putting on final audio, all this. So Autodesk Flame is a really powerful compositing software. I'm going to go into what is essentially the batch environment, which looks like this, a very scary tree. So these are the things that people see and they say, I'm never going to get into visual effects. And that said, this comp is a bit of a mess. I went through several versions of this ghost, and some of the environments and some of the ingredients I had in it, I wanted to recycle from a previous version. So there's a couple of things. But let me just start on the sort of building this scene. So we scrubbed through the scene right before, but I'll start on some of the individual elements. So this right here is this is a still frame, but this turns into what is essentially our plate, which is a still non-moving environment behind the ghost. Nothing going on except for a little bit of shadow, but I froze that. And then my other element is the actual ghost, the actor giving her performance. So in this, you can see there's another actor on the left side of the frame, and then the ghost here. She doesn't have any green screen behind her, which was so fun. But I want to make these two things together. So the first thing I do is I cut out the ghost so I can include that other actor. And this now becomes my main plate. So I'm going to have one side that has the ghost that's getting all the effects, and then another side that has the actor and the environment as it's sort of moving. And it is locked off, which makes it a lot easier. So what I need to do to control that effect is I need to build a matte. And a matte is just a black and white image of what I want to apply an effect to. And it looks sort of like this.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
this is a very rough machine learning. So some programs have something called machine learning, which is essentially they are learning to be able to cut out a person on their own. And then for some parts of the image, I'm using just color keying and seeing like, oh, well, her hair is, sort of light gray here and the background's black. I can get sort of like a rough matte here. So this is a very rough start of the action that I need. And if we kind of look at it down here, it's also made up of all these garbage masks, which are controlling and filtering out all the other elements. There's a bright light behind her, all this. I'm getting rid of all that and just keeping the body. So down the sort of flow of this thing, I want to apply this ghost effect to her. So the first thing I'm going to do is start to add some transparency. So this is now me mixing that plate with the other actor on the left and nothing background, mixing that with my actor. And I'm only doing it part way. So let's see. That's her full, that's her half. So now I have the transparency I want. I can start to see the car behind her, and I can see her face. Her face isn't fully gone. Let's see. Yeah, here we go. And then if I move further down this chain, I'm starting to apply the blue effect here. So I have a full blue on basically everything. Let's see if I can find that. And of course, the fun part about digging into these comps much later is you forget where everything is. And when you have like 90 shots to do, you don't bother going through and labeling each one if you're the only one that's doing them, which I was. So let's see. From here, yes. So we have basically a blue effect that honestly, all I start doing is just multiplying it on top. I'm using an add filter and I'm brightening up the bright parts of her face. I'm highlighting some of the other parts that I want to highlight, but mostly since the matte is less transparent on her face, it's going to bring out her face more here while still keeping that blue effect. If I move further down, okay, I have a little bit of glow that I'm adding on the outside edges to her. And her hair. And then the last thing I'm going to do on this comp is I'm going to bring back the blood and the windshield wiper on her front, because we wanted that to still be like, it's a comedic look that she still has a windshield wiper stuck in her
part
chest.
of the joke. Yeah.
It's part of the joke. So, and it was much more effective when it was interacting with the scene and going across the other guy's face during moments than it was if we just made it part of her body, because you know, the windshield wiper didn't pass on, she did, but she still has stuck having to drag this thing around.
Right.
So those are sort of the basic things, and there's a lot of other very small things that go into it. So when I was talking about adding some depth behind her, this is kind of what I'm talking about. There's a node here. It's going to move very slowly, of course, but if you're looking at the image, it's sort of barely shifting.
Yeah.
So that's the water turbulence, or that there's a node that basically puts on or tries to recreate what it looks like when you have water that's moving and rippling around as if raindrops were falling on top of it. Then you can control the speed of that, but that's something I wanted to put behind this her and on the edges of her. So as you can see, the car behind her doesn't look exactly like it's in focus there as it does right behind her. Wanted a little more depth that kind of makes it look like we're looking through her and that there's more going on than just a flat composite. And that turns into this final comp, which is then multiplied over and over, and new comps or new mats are cut out for her in every single shot.
Nice.
But that is essentially this sort of flow of building that shot, and really the main ingredients of it were a plate of nothing on it, and then a plate of the actors, and then finding a balance in between that to add effects and deciding where I want effects to go and where I don't want effects to go.
I mean, one thing that you benefit from doing it all on location is you don't have to worry about trying to match the lighting.
Yes.
On the actors, you have it there. And that's one of the dead giveaways when you start doing green screen and so forth, is that just doesn't quite line up.
That's what totally makes a bad composite. That's what you always tell when you look at something on TV or in films and you're just like, something doesn't look right. And I wanted the light to hit them. I wanted to look like they were in the scene. And unfortunately, that put a lot of burden on me as an artist later to then go out and cut them out because I don't have the green screen. And there were a couple of reshoots that just had to be done with green screen, but hopefully the lighting was matched well enough that, you know, you got fooled.
What was your shooting schedule on this? How long did it take to shoot, and then how long did it take to edit and post?
So it was a 7-day shoot broken up over the course of like 2.5 months. We shot it in January of 2020 to March 9th of 2020. And literally 2 days after we stopped shooting, the NBA shut down, and we had a pandemic right after that.
Yeah.
And the learning experience certainly was, since this was my first directed thing, was doing everything in post now split away from everybody. All the sound design done remotely, all the editing from my editor done remotely, every part of it done through Zoom and through calls and through emails. And I certainly don't have a Flame at home necessarily. What I'm showing you on right now is a sort of beta version of Flame that I can open up for just very simple comps and like scrubbing through stuff. But you saw how challenging it was just to move from frame to frame there. I'm doing this from a laptop. There's no way I could finish the scale of this on there. So luckily I had some post shops that were open enough or welcome to let me come in.
Nice.
I worked out of studios a lot during the pandemic just as a Flame artist. So I'd ask, hey, look, if I give you a discounted rate on some of the work that I'm doing for you, will you let me stay late? And so I can work on my own project on your machine. And that was a bargain I struck with a lot of places. And it meant that I was dragging around a hard drive and archiving a lot and doing it. But it's that kind of beg, borrow, and steal thing that, you know, you kind of have to do, not just during a pandemic, but just for filmmaking when you're starting out in general.
Maddie and I did a visual effects retrospective, I think maybe around a year ago. And that was one of the things that I brought to the table was doing some VFX editing and producing and getting a bunch of artists. And with an independent, you know, it never fails, right? It's like, what's our budget? And the producer of an independent film is just like, you know, starts out with this. And you're like,
there isn't one.
And then you kind of get tired of the term shoestring, right?
Yeah.
Shoestring budget. But the saving grace was that we could provide work for visual effects artists. And because we weren't like a studio film, we didn't necessarily have a definitive deadline. Of course, we want to hit festivals and so forth. So that was kind of the compromise was, well, we can afford this, but usually at a studio, you would have to get this done in 3 days. We will give you 3 weeks to do it, that kind of thing. So it kind of seems like the same kind of maneuvering that you had to do as well.
Yeah, I think at some point, and I think it's good advice, is you have to give yourself limits. You know, like I could have messed with or adjusted that ghost effect for honestly years with the amount of time it was going to be in the film, like in the amount of scrutiny. In reality, like I'm really glad it was effective. I love the way it looked, but I think I could have probably stopped messing with it like 2 or 3 versions before the version I did, you know, and it would have been completely fine. So I think as artists, as directors, even me, like when I was directing this, like you got to stop this shot. You have what you need, trust your actors, and you got to move on so you get everything else. Like we had one day that went really over, and it was just lack of experience and not setting those limits, not having a producer there that said like, you know what, we have to move on. We have what you need. Like there are more important things. So especially in visual effects, yeah, you could kind of do this for years, like just kick this project down and keep adjusting and keep messing with transparency and a new effect and some glowy thing. But it's important to then say like, okay, this shot has to take me 2 hours. Then I have to go on to the next one. I have 10 shots I need to get done today. I need to finish the effects in the scene, And as I got further into it, and the whole post process took the rest of 2020, once I finally got an edit locked in like August of that, because there's a lot of weird months in there where people weren't working, myself included. And then most of 2021, like up until like September, I was doing effects on the weekend, at night, in the morning, just whenever I could get to a flame, work on it. You know, it's a 29-minute short. One of the characters has that effect applied to them in almost every scene. So aside from a lot of other effects, you know, there are cats and deer comped and owls and cockroaches.
Yeah.
So
well, that brings me to a narrative point. Let me mention. Speaking of what's a visual effect shot, what is not, what can you get away with in practical terms? Not the animals per se, but the animal spirits. I thought was really, really clever. You know, it's just you could have, you know, if this were a Hollywood produced film, you know, I could see the studio saying like, no, those have to be computer graphic generated, and they have to be a hybrid between the actress and you know her spirit animal. And instead, it's just like, well, let's just get, you know, animal onesies and play and play off of the fun, you know, off the film. That just seemed really appropriate. And frankly, I think it actually enhanced the visual effects that you did have, because you didn't push it with the other, you know, with the spirit animals. You're just like, no, it's funny, just have her wear a onesie. That's
Yeah.
enough, you know. So it almost made the actual spirits in the movie more believable in a sense.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
appreciate you saying that, and that is a very good, like, I think don't get too cute thing. Like, we, for a lot of these scenes, we have animals in them that are basically these spirits are haunting them, and they're standing next to them, but they're standing next to very cheap versions of them in
yeah,
essentially felt onesies, and they look cheap. And I think I
right,
like that because it's like you're imposters. You're
right.
trying to haunt this ghost or this deer, and you should look like shit. You're doing a bad job. This is a bad thing you're doing.
Well, you know,
Um,
it speaks to the audience you're kind of playing to as well. I mean, the
right,
audience that I feel you're kind of playing to is kind of your post college grad, just
right,
starting to get out in the real world. So you're going to have cheap IKEA furniture. You're going to
yeah,
buy a cheap, you know,
yeah,
onesie to
yeah.
lounge in.
You might
So
have to have that Scarface poster on the wall as set design. It's not. It's gonna look bad.
yes,
It's gonna
exactly.
look bad, but find a way to make it work for you. Put in a line about how Scarface is trope or whatever, but like I think that's a good thing to highlight, especially in a visual effects age and when a lot
Yeah,
of people have access to filters on their phone. And it is really easy to make new effects using the phone on the footage you have, but it still has to work for you, like
right,
the best videos you do see on social media are the ones that the filter complements, where the joke was underneath whatever they were doing anyway,
right,
and the
right.
effect just highlights
It,
that.
it
All the
enhances it.
filters,
Yeah.
yeah, all the filters that enlarge the eyes of the mouth or all that, they're all just complementing whatever joke you were doing. So as long as your story is solid, you can just apply when necessary the visual effects.
Well, tell us. You're you're going through the film festival circuit. Where are you in the whole scheme of things, and where do you want Just a Ghoul to take you? What's your hope for this endeavor?
I mean, look, I am so thrilled this film even got made, considering the last 2 years and how much help I needed on it, how much I needed to learn. I'm really thrilled with how it finished up. And look, it's a 29-minute short romantic comedy about ghosts. Like, it's not for every festival, and that's definitely been a realization. But I've loved where it's gone. I loved showing it at Poppy Jasper. I can't believe it won Best Visual Effects. We did just win Best Comedic Short at Blackbird Film Festival,
Nice,
and we still
congratulations.
have to appear. Well, yeah, it just appeared in Film Invasion LA, which was nice to see it in Los Angeles, where I live. And then it has two more that it still has yet to premiere of that I know about. And, still waiting on a few acceptance, but I think the festival run will kind of wrap up at the end of summer, beginning of fall.
Okay,
And yeah, honestly, this is a story I really would like to make more publicly available. Obviously, with festivals, you have to kind of keep it where it is and
right.
exclusive. And I'm really excited to show it and kind of springboard to other projects that I learned much from on this.
Well, as we mentioned from the beginning, your day job is visual effects.
Right.
So, um, visual effects artists to visual effects artists, where do you want to go, having directed this film? I mean, every step of the way I worked at a studio or so forth. I worked, as Maddie mentioned, I worked in Industrial Light and Magic for 15 years, I think. That's
Right.
really where I cut my teeth, going from a PA to a senior visual effects editor.
Wow.
And when I left, people were like, well, why would you want to leave? Why would you want to leave Industrial Light and Magic? And it's
Right.
like, well, I was there for 15 years. It's like
Right.
you can have the most wonderful high school experience, but at a certain
Yeah.
point, you got to leave after 4 years. It's
Yeah.
the same thing for me with Pixar and so forth. So, um, where do you, what was your ambition going into this field, and where do you want it to take you?
Well, I certainly wanted the impetus for this was I had been working on so many of people's projects, for years. As a visual effects artist, you work on what you can get. You know,
Hmm. Yeah.
you're freelancing, you're with the studio. I really wanted to work on something that I made. And
Yeah.
honestly, I wanted to see if I liked directing. I've met a million directors. I've seen some that sit outside smoking and screaming on their phone all day long. I've met some that are just like, can't wait to work on the next thing. And I kind of wanted to see where I wanted to fall. And like you said, I can't imagine doing the same thing for the next 45 years.
Yeah.
I want to keep expanding my resume. I want to keep growing. And I fell in love with directing during this.
Well, that's what I was going to
I,
ask you. So
yeah,
did you become soured by it, or did you become inspired by it?
I get inspired by it. And you know what? It's one of the first times in my life that I really was happy to learn about my shortcomings. And there have been very few moments where I've been excited to know exactly where I did something wrong, where I could have done better, where I messed up, where just any room for improvement. And I think that was kind of an indicator that like I want to keep doing this because I can't wait to improve on those things on the next one. And
Yeah.
I wanted to bring visual effects, which was a strength of mine, to my first project. And I think what I learned in the process is a lot more about story, and how to balance that strength, with something I hadn't done before. So I think moving forward, projects I'll work on will really understand that balance even further. I'm just really excited to work on the next one and get it going.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Like you mentioned, it took 7 days, and immediately
Right.
you think, oh, a week. And then you also mentioned, but that was spread across over like 3
Yeah.
months or so. On one hand, you can say, oh, this is, especially when you're in the thick of it, that's like frustrating because can't
Yeah.
we just go on to day two? But on the other hand, it's kind of great that you have that break in between, because I'm sure you had these
Yeah.
moments where it's just like, I directed the scene this way. When I go out the gate the next time, I've learned from the day two shoot, day three is going to
Yes.
be much different. Did you find
Yes.
that to be true?
Very much. And I really
Yeah.
underestimated the amount of preparation I would need on set and the amount of flexibility I'd need on set. Both of those things. As prepared as I felt, as I had my storyboards and my script and had rehearsed with the actors, like, you don't like, it's so turbulent on set when it's your set and it's your first set. I've set supervised a lot, but it's under the sort of guise of having a budget and so much crew and all this.
Right.
And
And you're
when
not
it's
the
a
main
lot of,
guy. Now you're the
and you're
main
not the main
guy.
guy. Now you're the main guy, and you got a lot of answers to solve. But there's also you've exhausted all of your friends that are willing to work for free on this thing. So if something has to be done, everyone else is fill, and all of a sudden you as the director are like now holding a teddy bear up under a shot as well, and doing like the random PA stuff that,
Yeah.
you know what, you should do. Like you
Yeah.
should do this stuff. And you know what? Because you didn't prepare enough. And you'll have build more people into your sort of day next time, and this will be a lesson for that. Um, but yeah, I've lost my train of thought completely, but
Well,
it, yeah.
any thoughts? Is there just a Ghoul 2, or is there a what would you like to do next? I always feel bad for filmmakers that get pigeonholed in things like, oh, like
Right.
M. Night Shyamalan had this reputation of, oh, he does horror with a twist.
Right.
And on one hand,
Right.
and everyone kept saying he's the next Alfred Hitchcock, and it's just like, what if he doesn't want to be the next Alfred Hitchcock?
Yeah.
I
I
mean,
know.
or I remember when I worked for Lucasfilm, the big thing for George was he always wanted to do a comedy, and everyone was just like, I don't want to see a comedy from George Lucas, you know.
Right. But then
Um,
it was, it was, what did he do? Was it Howard the Duck?
well, he executive
Yeah.
produced Howard the Duck, and what did he do? He executive produced, when I was there, uh, just a blip of a film called Radioland Murders, which was a
Oh, yeah,
comedy.
yeah, yeah. That's right.
And then he always talked about he wanted to do a Star Wars comedy. Now, some people would say he did do a Star Wars comedy, and some, but but so for you, what would you what's your next ambition, or can you tell?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Filmmakers get rather
I know. I'm not
superstitious
gonna get
about these things too.
I'm not gonna get cute about that. Because I am very excited to work on the next thing. It's definitely gonna be less visual effects, and be shorter, so I can actually finish it this year. But yeah, I'm working on another short film. I think I need to get quite a few of them under my belt to really feel good about who I am as a director and who I am as a storyteller. This was a great learning experience, but you really figure out. I really figured out a lot of myself in this process, editing and reviewing what I'd done and preparing for the next thing. So I have another short film that I'm preparing for right now. I'm still writing it, but close to finishing that one. And one of the things I really realized during shooting this too was a lot of the people that are in it it's not a very diverse cast. Like, it's a lot of white people, and that's fine. I mean, it's a lot of who I knew just because I'm in LA and there's a lot of just white actors around, and it was cast of people in the film who also happen to be white. But I want to have more opportunity for diversity on the next one. And I didn't have the casting resources on this one, and we're asking people to work for free to really say no to many of the actors that wanted to play parts. So I'm really looking forward to getting a more diverse story in the next one. And a lot of it will still be issues that are relatable. Like, certainly anger is something I've always found very interesting and I've always experienced on high levels. And I know it means something, and in a sort of write what you know thing, I'm sort of exploring what anger issues really mean and also trying to weave that in with a diverse story.
You kind of touch upon that a little bit with the main character in Just a Ghoul,
actually,
too.
Yeah, you're right. Actually, now
it.
that I think about it, everyone's just going to say my films are really angry.
Just the notion of like it speaks to the spirit idea too, your inner self versus how you project yourself.
Right.
Outward.
Certainly building that character out, and everyone needs an outlet for something. The Billy character needed an outlet for his anger after he lost his girlfriend. It all just got bottled up, and that was the start of his sort of character arc and learning how to manage that and what it really means. That's starting to actually, now that I think of it, become a through line in the things that I write, is dealing with that anger in life. So that's one thing I'm working on. I'm excited about that. And the other thing is, the claw machine that's in the movie, I actually still have it. And it was one of the things that was acquired very cheaply on Craigslist. And I was always planning on reselling it. And then the pandemic happened, and I didn't want to have strangers in my home to check out a claw machine. So through the pandemic, I started, just playing with it and attaching cameras to it so that I could play virtually with my friends. And I've actually started to spin it into an internet talk show where people play the claw machine as guests.
Oh, that is awesome.
And I host it. So that's a sort of fun thing. And maybe that's the way you don't get pigeonholed into one specific thing. You don't get M. Night Shyamalan, is if you run a internet claw machine show and then also do serious works on the side.
I think you're on the right path. For sure. I definitely want to check out your what would you call it? Your claw cast?
Claw machine talk show. It's in its infancy. We've not yet put out episodes, but started a small TikTok following to get the ball rolling.
Awesome. Well, you heard it here first. The PJIFF.
There's a video up on our YouTube channel, Poppy Jasper's YouTube channel. Where you show a little bit of the claw machine.
Yes, I tried to make it a bit when we did our interview, and we got so engaged we just blew right through it. But
we forgot to do the claw.
Same premise, yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think we're just about out of time. Jameson, I want to thank you for giving us this opportunity. This was fantastic. Again, congratulations on the completion, as well as winning the Visual Effects Award for the Poppy Jasper International Film Festival.
Thank you.
Just a Ghoul is the film, and we can't wait to see what you do next.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for having me and talking with me. It was such a pleasure to talk with you guys, learn a bit more, and discuss the film. It was a delight.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Jameson, for both being here today. I think this was really, really interesting, and I learned a lot myself. So I'm sure a lot of people are going to get a lot out of this conversation. So thank you both so much.
Excellent.
Yeah, thanks.
Maura, 29, went to Auburn. Nice. You got this. You got this. You got this. You got this! Right?
So you ready?
Sorry, still waiting.
Billy.
Holy jeez,
It's Mara. Hi. I'm sorry I missed our date. I have an excuse.
Huh?